Good day. It is Sunday, and that means I get to keep you company for a little while as you paint some models, which is great. I'm just going to make this picture a little bit bigger. There we go. That's much better. There you go. So, today, as you can probably see, we are discussing the 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have a lot of bias when it comes to the Iron Warriors. Easily one of my favorite legions, if not my favorite legion, and this is why I said a few weeks ago we're going to be doing 2 or 3 of my favorite legions, followed by one of my least favorite legions. As in, we are going to be doing the Emperor's Children, the Iron Warriors, the White Scars, and then of course the Space Wolves after that. Or the Rout, as they like to call themselves, because, you know, they've got to give themselves a nice frilly name because they're very important and special. Anyway, hopefully my dislike of Space Wolves won't come across too much in that video, and it won't. But I will explain where it comes from in the video too. But rewinding to this one, we're covering what I would say, if I had to rank all the legions in terms of which is my favourite, the Iron Warriors would be right at the top, and I don't think it's particularly close. The Iron Warriors they have something of everything for me that I love. They are tenacious, they are spiteful, but they are woefully misunderstood, and that's what I really like about them. In fact, there are more loyalist Marines from this Traitor Legion than any other, if you look in the canon. I think there are 17 named Marines from the Horus Heresy era from the Iron Warriors who are loyalist. And that's because Perturabo didn't join Horus's cause out of any sort of flaw in his character. He joined Horus's cause through sheer logical reasoning. And yeah, I've been forsaken by this Imperium for a long, long, long time, and it's time to act on that. He is the only traitor Primarch where I can literally sit back and say, I probably might have made the same decision. You know? And I think a lot of other people are in that boat as well. Which is why Perturabo is incredibly affable and weirdly relatable. Also, he's a wargamer. Go figure. And we're going to go into his lore right now. So, of course, one of the 20 Primarchs taken from the Emperor's side by the Chaos Gods back in the day. But also, I think it's incredibly important to realise that he comes to rest on a world called Olympia, which is extremely ancient Greek, which is not the type of thing you would think of when thinking of the Lord of Iron, when thinking of the Lord of the 4th Legion. You wouldn't be thinking that he would come from such a wonderfully sunny place. But the thing is with Olympia, it's not sunny. Imagine a Greek world that is constantly blanketed by dark clouds, that is constantly buffeted by storms, and with mountains everywhere, and with patriarchs ruling over big, vast city-states all over the place. Imagine this interscene conflict between these places, and the backstabbing and the political skullduggery that keeps going on between the houses. This is the place that Perturabo was brought up in. And he was brought up by the Tyrant of Lokos, which is one of the main cities of this world. And the Tyrant was not a father figure to him. I mean, he tried to be initially, but Perturabo was quite sullen and was quite distant and didn't want anything to do with him, pretty much. And so, the Tyrant of Lokos started to treat Perturabo as a resource. He started treating him as a bargaining chip, as someone to earn him more power. And of course, being a Primarch, that's exactly what he did. He starts smashing city-states around him and starts bleeding them dry, and he becomes quite arrogant in himself. But what I really like about Perturabo is that he doesn't always succeed. And I think Perturabo is a really good example of how to write a good character. Because early on in his life, he is challenged by one of the main sons of the Tyrant of Lokos to a competition, a forging competition, which is incredibly, incredibly cool as far as I'm concerned. That these two guys are going to forge weapons. I think we saw it with Fulgrim as well. These two guys are going to have these weapons. But Perturabo shunned both of his siblings, so his adopted siblings of Herakon and Andos, and he only enjoyed the company of his foster sister Caliphone. And Caliphone is somebody who he will tragically kill later on in his life, of course. So many saw Perturabo as a cold and brooding child. I'm reading this directly from the wiki, by the way, this part. But when considered that he had been thrown onto a world with no idea of his origins or purpose, this is perhaps a little harsh. Nonetheless, Perturabo took the name of a venerated Olympian heroes, as was expected of nobility, but rather an ancient title for those with prodigious ability. So instead of taking one like a Heracles or anything like that, he took the name of Perturabo, which is a signal of his ability. Perturabo waged wars against rivals of his adopted father, and due to the many warring city-states of Olympia, gathered enormous experience in siege warfare. Overseeing the construction of many siege engines and once thought technologically impossible on the planet. Perturabo soon scored victory after victory, and became known as a merciless, bloody-handed warlord. Throughout his life, Perturabo was haunted by visions and feelings of a great maelstrom, as in the Eye of Terra. Though he told no one of this, as he feared it would be a sign of his weakness. Alright? So he's plagued by this his entire life, and he doesn't tell anyone about it. Which I think is pretty cool. But there is a short story when Perturabo is doing a competition with one of his brothers in making a weapon, or making a thing of some kind. I forget what it was. But anyway, Perturabo creates this wonderful piece of artistry that is absolutely almost unstoppable. It's a wonderful piece of art that he presents to the baying crowds, and they are cheering for this. You know, they are so happy, and Perturabo's happy as well. He knows he's won the contest. No one can defeat him in skills of making things and creating things with his hands, until his brother steps up and reveals his own. Let's call it a weapon. He reveals his own weapon, and this is so beautiful it actually brings the crowd there to tears. And regardless, Perturabo loses the contest, right? He loses the contest doing something that he should know or be able to do better than anybody else. That's because Perturabo has flaws. He can be arrogant. He can be stubborn. He can not see the wood for the trees sometimes. And this is why he relates so much to me, because I sometimes have problems seeing the woods for the trees. Every writer does. And so he sings to me pretty well. I really like him. So when the Emperor comes down to Perturabo, when he comes down to Olympia, Perturabo immediately submits himself to the Emperor's mercy, and he ousts the tyrant of Lokos. So he ousts his father pretty quickly. So his father, his adopted father, Damnakos, is said to have spent his remaining few years gathering forces to attempt to retake his power. He failed, but created a current of unrest, which would be used later. Perturabo spent much time with his brother Magnus on Terra in his early days in the fledgling Imperium, attempting to discover the many secrets of mankind's past, and became particularly interested in the works of famous inventors. It became said that of all the Emperor's sons, Perturabo had the most raw scientific and technological knowledge. Okay. But just to rewind that, when he meets the Emperor, Perturabo is beside himself with joy. Nearly every other Primarch is pretty much, okay, right, he's here, great, we're loving this, okay, cool. I will come and fight for you. Yes, even Gilliman is slightly like, oh, okay, you're the Emperor. Okay, I'll come fight with you. That's fine. Whereas Perturabo's on the brink of tears when he meets the Emperor, because he's always wanted acceptance, and he's always wanted that affirmation that he was special, which is why he wanted to win that contest so much. He almost wanted to win it too much, which is, in my opinion, why he lost it. You know? The other weapon that was presented was absolutely beautiful in its simplicity, you know. But finally, Perturabo is given an absolute affirmation of how special he is. And you can see how much it means to him. He has this dream of going to the stars with his father and conquering them and being this mighty warrior. Little does he know that he and his legion will be used for almost anything but. Alright. When Perturabo first sees his legion, first sees the Iron Warriors, he finds their combat record lacking. That's because the Iron Warriors back in the day were essentially an honoured force of bog standard normal warriors. Astartes, true, but bog standard normal warriors, alright? Which means they were used in siege warfare, they were used in your normal battles, and Perturabo found this particularly annoying. He didn't see the combat record when he compared the Iron Warriors to the rest of the legions to be anything worth noting. In fact, he considered it an insult to who he was. And here we have the arrogance and the harshness of Perturabo shining through again. Because he orders the legion to be decimated. Which means, if you're familiar with Roman history, it's a very similar thing. One of every 100 legionaries is picked out by lottery and beaten to death by his other 10 fellows. That is to beat out the weakness in the legion. That's to beat out the weakness in what he saw as those who didn't have the stomach to fight with what was to come. Because I always think that Perturabo had a good idea of what his legion would be good at, and that was siege warfare. When you look at the fortresses on Olympia, Perturabo had the perfect place to practice his siegecraft, to practice beating down these massive walls. And of course, he does. He has the Iron Warriors become a force of absolute clinical precision when taking down armoured targets, when taking down fortresses and things like that. But I'm going to read from the wiki just for a little bit, just to give you a brief overview of the Great Crusade before I go into more detail of what he did there. So, Perturabo established himself as efficient and highly capable, but also brutal, bitter, and envious, as we've already seen. It is widely acclaimed that Perturabo was envious of Rogel Dawn. He was annoyed by his constant reminders of the perfection of the defences of Terra. The other Primarchs also kept Perturabo at a distance. This might have been because of his supreme command of technology, far in advance of anything the other Primarchs could do. He is referred to as a comrade who devised the best plan to avoid the defences of Overdog Mashog, an Orc war boss under attack by Leman Russ, leader of the Space Wolves, and Jagatai Khan, Khan of the White Scars. The Iron Warriors went on to create citadels throughout the regions they fought in. Small numbers of Iron Warriors were left behind at these outposts, but Perturabo resented being forced to split his legion. So his legions being bled white, essentially, throughout the galaxy. As time went on, they were stereotyped as being the best army for sieges and garrisons, but eventually the Iron Warriors were so worn out that they simply began to enjoy the killing they had to do after the trenches were dug. A particularly vicious campaign was against the Hrud in the Sakraktka Deeps, a region that Perturabo saw as strategically useless. Nonetheless, he dutifully oversaw the purging of the Hrud despite his legion's heavy casualties, as it was ordered by the War Council. At the climax of the campaign, as his fleet lay devastated by a Hrud temporal shockwave, Perturabo could only blame the Emperor's vanity for the damage done to his sons on this useless campaign. It might well have been Horus who kept the Legion on this roll, allowing him to more easily sway the mind of Perturabo towards chaos. So, this goes on for centuries. The Iron Warriors are made to sludge through the mud. For centuries, they are made to toil underneath every other legion to prop up their glory, which is something that I absolutely love. I love the fact that as Warhammer 40,000 or Horus Heresy in this case, throws so many wonderfully large, grandiose heroes at you. We have these dogs of war, these guys who are in the mud, who are slogging it out with the worst the galaxy has to offer, sometimes in fruitless conflicts that don't mean anything, but they're fighting for Imperial pride, essentially. You know? I often think when the Imperium has to win, you send the Sons of Horus, you send the Lunar Wolves. When the Imperium cannot afford to lose, you send the Iron Warriors. And that is what we have here. The Iron Warriors will outlast. They are a guaranteed eventual win, because they will outlast whoever they go up against. And I love that. I love that. So, the Horus Heresy. So, shortly after the Shractica Deeps campaign, Perturabo learned that his homeworld Olympia was in rebellion, so Damnacos was dead, and in his absence the politicking and bickering of the city-states had resumed. Perturabo demanded the Olympians themselves enact decimation, killing 1 in every 10 of their own, or face extermination and enslavement. So unlike Conrad Kurz, he actually gives his people an ultimatum. Many refused, and Perturabo purged Olympia, city by city. So he doesn't do it with torpedoes, he doesn't do it with an orbital bombardment, he sends his men down there to do it in person, like an Iron Warrior should, face to face, hammer to hammer, wall to wall, city by city. That's where the phrase iron within and iron without comes from. By the time the massacre was over, 5 million Olympians had been killed and the rest put into slavery. While storming Leucos' palace, Perturabo came across his old foster sister Caliphone, who we've already talked about, and strangled her to death after a furious argument where she blamed the Primarch for what had befallen the world. Okay? As Olympia died, Perturabo looked on in cold silence. After the pyres were burning, the Iron Warriors realized what they had done. They were no more the saviors of the Imperium, destroying the Horde one moment and the next they were committing genocide. Perturabo realized the Emperor could never forgive him for what he had done. Horus, on the other hand, had commended Perturabo for his decisive action, and the Lord of Iron swore an oath of fealty to the War Master. Horus later made the most of the opportunity by presenting Perturabo with a hammer named Forgebreaker, the gift symbolic of a signing of a pact between them. So this happens after the Dropsite Massacre, where Fulgrim has Forgebreaker, which we've covered already. So it's nice how this is all tying in chronologically, isn't it? So now we have Perturabo making the logical, in my opinion, decision to side with Horus, because he doesn't know the shit show that the traitor legions will fall into later. He has just seen the Dropsite Massacre, okay? You know? In fact, what I find really odd, and this might be a continuity error here. Right, this might be a continuity error. Because, we've just discovered, live on the channel, because before the Dropsite Massacre, no, never mind. I think they got it right. No, before the Dropsite Massacre, according to the chronology here, Perturabo was given Forgebreaker, which is not right because Forgebreaker was used at the Dropsite Massacre by Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus, and Fulgrim gives Forgebreaker to Horus, who then gives Forgebreaker to Perturabo. But this is saying that he gets Forgebreaker before the Dropsite Massacre. Anyway, continuity error. There we go. So, it was in that time of the disturbing news of the Horus Heresy, and that new orders came from Terra. Lemon Russ and the Space Wolves had attacked Magnus and his 1,000 sons on Prospero. Horus had turned renegade with his legion, the Sons of Horus, but beside some other legions. The whole of the Imperium was on the brink of a civil war. The new orders were to join with 6 other legions and then to face Horus and his forces on Eastvan 5. The result of the following battle was that the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion all joined Horus and almost completely destroyed the 3 remaining loyal legions in the drop site massacre. Alright, after that, the Iron Warriors were let loose, and Perturabo relished the opportunity to fight in a way that did not rely on a massive siege engines and trench warfare. Because of their massive deployment throughout the heresy, dozens of warsmiths, which are, almost captains in the Iron Warriors, took over planets and demanded tithes to support the heresy. Alright? They acted as feudal warlords almost. Okay, so we have Perturabo finally being let loose, and there is a lovely line in Angel Exterminatus where you first see the Iron Warriors fighting I think it's Imperial Fists. And one of the Imperial Fists is slaying, I think it's cultists or something, left and right with his sword, and he doesn't have a helmet on. To which one of the Iron Warriors, who is fully helmeted and with his bolt gun, mutters the word idiot and blows his fucking brains out. Which is exactly the attitude the Iron Warriors have, right? Pragmatic. Do what, have the tools, what does the job. Just do it, right? So now we move into the actual story of Angel Exterminatus, which is Fulgrim, who is now fully mental. We've covered him in our last video. I didn't want him to be a psycho, but here we go. And right now, he asks Perturabo to accompany him to find a weapon that could turn the tide of the war, the Angel Exterminatus. Now, this is one of the main things that I don't like about the story of Perturabo. But I do think it settles into one of his core flaws. He trusts Fulgrim, and, at this stage, Fulgrim's acting like a really shifty motherfucker, right? He's acting like an absolutely shifty dude, right? No one's going to trust this guy. But Perturabo does. And I think this harkens back to the need of Perturabo's main flaw is that he wants to be accepted. He wants to be loved. He wants to be liked. But his personality doesn't let him, right? His personality means he's quite cold. And it's quite off-putting to other people. He doesn't want to be. He wants to be liked. He wants to be a Gilliman. He wants to be a Russ. He wants to be someone who's clapped on the shoulder and has friends and has brothers. And so whenever one of his brothers comes to him and asks him to be his friend, he's easily manipulated by people offering him friendship. And I think that's such a wonderful flaw for a Primarch to have. In the end, obviously, he's betrayed by Fulgrim. He uses much of the Primarch's power to become a demon. Which is, pretty shitty. Pretty shitty behaviour by Fulgrim, but, what can you expect? He is inadvertently saved, though, Perturabo, by shattered legionaries who turn up to turn the tide. And it is Perturabo who shatters Fulgrim's form, and he does so with Forgebreaker. Again, a lovely poetic moment. The hammer of Ferrus Manus is the thing that shatters Fulgrim's physical form. But unfortunately, at this point, Fulgrim has transcended to attain demonhood, and so whilst his physical form shatters, his demon Primarch is born. Later on in the Horus Heresy, the Primarch Angron, who is now a demon Primarch, has gone completely wild and is absolutely annihilating forces on the demon world of Saram. This is a Primarch who cannot be contained. This is a Primarch who we will see some art of in a minute. This is a Primarch who is absolutely uncontrollable. So who does Horus send to bring him into line? Perturabo. Right? On Saram, the demon Saram revealed that Angron was on Deluge before possessing the body of Volk, who is a Iron Warriors commander, and created the first Obliterator. So the demon Saram, when Perturabo is asking for where Angron is, this demon possesses somebody called Volk and he becomes the first obliterator. Right, this is somebody who's fused to all of their weapons. All right, Perturabo then travelled to Deluge, where he confronted the vicious and corrupted demon Primarch Angron. Perturabo and Angron engaged in a brutal battle, with the demon having the clear edge in power and speed. However, despite taking many wounds, Perturabo endured and goaded Angron, declaring that he was born a slave and now was a slave to darkness for all eternity. By using the Iron Warrior's Iron Circle and Volk to outmaneuver and bombard the World Eaters, Angron was bested as an Ultramarines fleet appeared in orbit over Deluge. Angron laughed and declared that they were all now going to die. But Perturabo reminded the Demon Primarch that he had seen his warriors butchered while he had done nothing once before, right? So, this is when obviously Angron is on New Syria and he can't do anything to save his people, right? This moved Angron enough to act, and after creating a warp storm, the Iron Warriors and World Eaters fleets were able to escape the Ultramarines and move to Ullanor, where they accompanied Horus for the muster. What this goes over, just glances over, is the fact that this is what I don't like about some people who look into Warhammer 40,000 lore. If you look closer into the story, actually read the story of Perturabo against Angron, he beats the living shit out of Angron, right? He dampens his demonic power, and he beats the ever-loving snot out of him with his hammer, right? So he isn't fending off Angron, right? He's standing toe-to-toe with him, and he does exactly what Lemon Russ did earlier on in the story. And we'll get to this later on when we cover Lemon Russ. But he actually takes Angron away from his legion, so he's got no support, and makes him walk through torrents of gunfire before even getting to him. So Angron's nearly on the brink of defeat before even Perturabo fights him. And when Perturabo does fight him, he beats the ever-loving shit out of him, because he's already weakened him. You know, he's very close to banishing him altogether, or even killing him outright, considering he's a Primarch. And that's when the Ultramarines turn up, and they're all forced to escape. That's what I really love about the people who write about Perturabo, right? He uses logic, cold, hard logic to beat Angron. He uses cold, hard sense to beat him. He doesn't walk up to him and try to have a duel one-on-one with him, because he knows whilst he can be a match for Angron, he might lose. Why fight a war where you're not guaranteed of winning? Because you're just going to cause losses, your men tons of losses, right? So he annihilates Fulgrim before even stepping onto the battlefield to face him. And when he finally does face him, he does it at a time of his choosing, uses Forgebreaker, and beats the shit out of him. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. This is why I advise you to go and read the books, rather than reading just the Lexicon. But anyway, the Iron Warriors then go to Talon, where they take part in probably the largest mechanical warfare, tank warfare in Galaxy's history. So once arriving there, they essentially Talon is a defeat for the traitors, or at least it's something that it's not a total victory anyway. But in Talon, we don't really see much of the man himself. We don't see much of Perturabo. But Perturabo and his Iron Warriors next found themselves trapped by singularity in the heart of the Eye of Terra. Perturabo gambles in his attempt to escape, driving straight into the black hole at its heart. Perhaps by sheer blind luck, they were transported far across the warp to the Talon system. Once arriving at Talon, Perturabo was made aware of the black Oculus hidden beneath the planet, and he immediately drew up plans to invade. Eventually, the Iron Warrior search for the black Oculus was exposed, and they were forced to withdraw from the planet. So, here we go. We're now heading towards the Ruin Storm, obviously holding off the Ultramarines, but we're now going towards Terra and the Solar War, which is the end game. So, I'm going to skip over much of this, because it's basically stuff that you should go and read about. in the Horus Heresy books. But what I would say is that Perturabo, Horus by this point is almost wholly given over to the warp. So he's at the point now where he's gone from the absolute apex of his power when he fought Lemon Russ. I think he was nearly at the apex of his power, but he still had a human edge, right? Which is what allowed Lemon Russ to actually stab him with the spear that he had there, which we'll get into next time, or the time after that. Now Horus is basically fused with the warp, and so he's not doing very much to actually command the Siege of Terra, which is, the Siege of Terra is a shit show. The Emperor should have had no chance at the Siege of Terra, right? But every single other legion present was almost acting against the interest of everybody else. Everybody but Perturabo and the Iron Warriors. Perturabo directed a masterful assault of the Imperial Palace, to the point that even though every other legion there was almost actively working against the shared goal of the traitors by going after their own things, you had the Night Lords were just crazy at this point and murdering everybody. You had the Emperor's children who just got bored and left and started murdering the local populace. You had the World Eaters, which were not a resource in themselves because they were just wanting to kill everybody and couldn't be given any orders. You had the Mortarian's Death Guard, which were basically embittered and only wanted to go and fight people like Jagadai Khan, right? They wanted to take those people on, and they weren't really taking orders from Perturabo. And of course, you had the Word Bearers, who were only there in small numbers because of what happened with Lorgar, and we'll get into that, where he was shamed by Horus and basically kicked out the traitor legions. And, of course, we have the Thousand Sons, which aren't really there. Only Magnus is there, and he's there just doing his own thing beneath the Imperial Palace. Craziness. So the only real... And, of course, the Sons of Horus, which are under the control of Abaddon, who is not a Primarch. Right. So, we have Perturabo, who is holding everything together. Perturabo is smashing down the walls of the Imperial Palace. And make no mistake, and I'm not saying this from any sort of bias, I honestly think that Perturabo wins the Siege of Terra. Right? He breaks through the Imperial Palace. He gets to the Emperor. He forces the Emperor to take Horus's gamble. He forces the Emperor onto the Vengeful Spirit. The Emperor needs to leave Terra at this point. Horus drops the Void Shields to invite the Emperor on to come and face him in a final duel, because the Ultramarines are on their way, and so are most of the Dark Angels. They're now on their way, right? And other legions too. So he needs a final battle, but so does the Emperor. The Emperor is about to be surrounded and murdered by the forces of the traitors, because not only has Perturabo successfully led his own warriors in taking down the Imperial Palace, he's maneuvered and manipulated the other blind traitor Primarchs into assaulting just where he wants them to. Just where he wants them to. So he inadvertently, he directs Angron. He just unleashes him, right? He doesn't try and control him, he just unleashes him where he wants him to be unleashed. With Mortarion, he just gently guides him to where he needs to be. He doesn't give orders, he just gently guides. He knows that's what they need to get the job done. It is a masterful approach to the Siege of Terra, and he wins the Siege of Terra. He beats Rogel Dawn here. He breaks down Dawn's defenses bit by bit, and Dawn's actions are absolutely heroic throughout the Siege of Terra, to the point where even holding off Perturabo's advance to the point where the Emperor can make the choice to go and face Horus is a miracle in itself. Both Primarchs deserve a huge wad of respect for what they do here. But obviously the Emperor kills Horus, and the siege ends. And Perturabo, and I will say this, Perturabo has had a lot of love in the Horus Heresy. He's basically the only Primarch to get what he wants. He wins. He does what he always wanted to do. He beats Rogel Dawn. Not once, but twice, as we'll get into the Iron Cage in a minute. So, he leaves, and he doesn't order retreat. He doesn't flee into the Eye of Terror. He actually stays in the Imperium, and just starts wasting planets left, right, and centre. In fact, he wastes one planet so hard that he creates his own bastion there called the well, he doesn't call it anything. He just calls it this absolutely untakeable fortress, and he challenges Rogel Dawn to come and get him. To which Rogel Dawn says quite proudly, "I will go dig Perturabo out of his iron cage." At which point, Perturabo pulls an Angron, in which he pulls the same thing he did with Angron. He knows the flaws of Rogel Dawn. He knows the stubbornness and pride of Rogel Dawn. And he knows full well that the Imperium is on the brink of another civil war, and that Dawn needs to get rid of the elements of his legion that will want to support the civil war that might take place with Roboute Guilliman. I'll get into that next time when we cover their legions. And so he creates the perfect trap. It is a place that Rogel Dawn knows full well it's a trap, by the way, but he has no choice but to take it, because Perturabo gives him the means of getting rid of elements of his legion that might support a civil war against Guilliman, a civil war that everybody knows the Imperium can ill afford. And so the Iron Cage takes place. It is a fortress with you know what? I'm just gonna read it from here. After fleeing Terra he doesn't flee, he leaves, following Horus's death, Perturabo took the opportunity to take vengeance on the Imperial Fists with a trap on Sebastus IV. The trap was known as the Eternal Fortress, that's the name I kept escaping me. A keep centred within 20 square miles of bunkers, towers, minefields, trenches, tank traps and redoubts. Upon hearing of this, Rogel Dawn proudly declared that he would dig Perturabo out of his hole and bring him back to Terra in an iron cage. Here we go. Rogel Dawn expected an honourable battle, but this was not to be. Beginning by isolating the four companies of the Imperial Fists from their orbital support, Perturabo began to carefully divide his enemy and destroy them piecemeal. Some Imperial Fists managed to penetrate the defences and reach the centre of the internal fortress, only to find there was no central keep, simply an open space, watched by yet more defences. The fortress was a decoy of no real value, surrounded by 20 miles of killing ground. By the 6th day of the siege, the Imperial Fist Space Marines were fighting individually, without support, using the bodies of their own brothers for cover. The siege of the Eternal Fortress, later referred to as the Iron Cage incident, lasted for a further 3 weeks. Relief came in the form of Roboute Guilliman and the Ultramarines who drove off the Iron Warriors, but the siege left Rogel Dawn a broken man and rendered the Imperial Fists unable to fight for 19 years. The gene seed of over 400 Imperial Fists was sacrificed to the Dark Gods, and Perturabo was elevated to the rank of Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided. Following the victory, the Iron Warriors fled to the Eye of Terror and secured a new demon world named Madrengard, crafting a terrible fortress where his soldiers ruled in vast towers. Perturabo's stronghold, the Fortress of Hate, is said to be the most redoubtable of the fortress worlds. Today, the Iron Warriors give their greatest loyalty to Perturabo for saving them from sacrifice in the name of the Emperor. So here we go. That's where I'm going to leave his story, because there's a lot more I want to talk about, but in essence, Perturabo gets what he wants. He gets everything that he wants. He's the only winner of the Horus Heresy. He batters Rogel Dawn to the point where he's a broken man, and he gets his own. He gets what he wants. He gets his own world with his own stuff on it, and he is completely surrounded by what he wants. Is he happy? No, because he's a traitor Primarch, and none of them are truly happy. Warped maybe, but not happy. He gets there's a sense of be careful what you wish for. With Perturabo, you get the sense that all he ever wanted, and this is told in his books as well, especially in his Primarch book, that when he envisions his perfect future, he envisions an empire that he's helping to rule. He's not ruling it himself, he's helping to rule it. And he's creating wondrous technologies and great fortress cities that will keep the people safe. And he's creating these wonders that will drive humanity on to greater and greater heights, even without him. So when he's long gone, you know, he is the Greek epitome of a society is great when men plant the seeds of trees in whom shade they know they will never sit in. That's what Perturabo is at his core. He's somebody who is not just an empire builder, he's a culture builder. Right? And Madrigard is the warped reflection of that need, of that want, which is why I love him so much. Okay. Now, in all honesty, people like this guy, Santos Varela, who you're seeing on screen right now, there are a lot of actual loyalist Iron Warriors. And that is because I do not believe the Iron Warriors are inherently evil or flawed. I think the Iron Warriors are logical to a fault. And the ones who went with Perturabo saw the logic in his choice. But also, the ones who went against him saw the logic in not being part of the traitor cause, and then went on their own. I will not be going into any of them here, because nearly all of the loyalist Iron Warriors are absolutely badass. In fact, I have changed the lore of my own chapter, and they are now finalized. They're done. It's written, and that will be probably the next video I'm going to do in terms of lore. My own chapter, the loyalist chapter, is now called the Astral Blades, where the traitors, or the renegades, quote unquote, are basically, the basic renegades, are the Iron Talons. And the Iron Talons are 90% Iron Warriors, loyalist Iron Warriors, who fight from the backs of their motorbikes. So it's essentially a 40k biker gang full of traitor Space Marines, which is, traitor, quote unquote, Space Marines. But in reality, these Iron Warriors were loyalists during the Imperium, during the Horus Heresy. They fought against the traitors. They went into the Eye of Terra to keep fighting them and never came back, essentially. And they just ride around the Eye of Terra, beating ever-loving shit out of anyone who crosses their path as a warband. But that is what I love about the Iron Warriors, is their tenacity, the fact that they are ill-used, and the fact that, to be honest with you, in terms of being a legion that is righteous in what it's doing, the Iron Warriors are probably the only traitor legion that you can understand why they did it. You can understand why they became a traitor legion, And I can tell you this, if just one or two of the other legions, the other traitor legions, had the mindset of Perturabo, at least a little bit, the Imperium would have lost the Horus Heresy. And that's all I have to say on the Iron Warriors. What do you think of the Iron Warriors? And you notice I've not really changed anything about his lore. This is one of the Primarchs that I really like the story of. I don't want to change it at all. I think it works extremely well. The one thing I may do, or I wanted to do in my brain, was to have the Age of Exterminatus story focus more on the fact that, and signpost more that Perturabo wants approval from his brothers. He wants to be friends with his brothers, right? I want when Lionel Johnson meets Perturabo, and Perturabo tricks him into giving him the siege engines that he's going to need at Terra, because he doesn't know Perturabo is a traitor at this point. I want that conflict to be in Perturabo. I want to see that he hates lying to this guy, because he knows Lionel Johnson doesn't mind him, because they're both a bit aloof and out there not wanting to talk to people. And it kills him that he has to betray this guy for the cause. And I would also make sure that that flaw within Perturabo is turned up. He wants people's approval. And only when he releases that, the beautiful thing about the Horus Heresy books, when Perturabo releases that need, and he says, literally, I don't need anybody's approval. Fuck them. That's when he basically goes Super Saiyan. That's when he basically reaches peak Perturabo, when he lets that flaw go. He's the only traitor Primarch who overcomes his central flaw None of the others do. Okay? I would also not make him a demon Primarch, but that's just me. I would make him sort of like he sacrifices those gene seed and he gets supercharged by the powers of chaos, but he refuses demonhood because fuck him. Like he doesn't want to be anybody's pet, right? So those are the only changes I would make. I love Perturabo. I love the Iron Warriors, and that is it. That is all I have to say. Thank you very, very, very much for watching. What would you do with the Iron Warriors? What do you think of them? Do you like them as a legion? If you do, put them in the comments below. Are you looking forward to me talking to you about any other legions? Please put them in the comments below. Would you change anything about the Iron Warriors and their background? Please put that in the comments below. Thank you very, very much for watching. Love you a long time. And I'll speak to you next time. Happy painting.